Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows of a spacious conference room on the 23rd floor of a business center in Sao Paulo. Mariana Bertulli was leisurely poring over documents, preparing for an important meeting. Her slender fingers, adorned with a single sapphire ring, a gift from her husband for their 15th wedding anniversary, neatly arranged the folders on the table. Next to her sat Eduardo Bertulli, her husband and business partner. His presence always filled the room with a special energy. Tall, trim, with barely noticeable gray hair on his temples, he radiated confidence and strength. Today, he was wearing the impeccably fitting dark blue suit that Mariana had helped him choose during their last trip to Milan together. The department heads gradually entered the room. Mariana noted to herself how the company had changed over the past 20 years, from a small office with a dozen employees to one of the largest companies in the region. Every chair in the meeting room was occupied, and the air was filled with the light hum of conversation and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "Good morning, colleagues." Eduardo stood at the head of the table, and all conversation instantly hushed. "Today, we are gathered to discuss a crucial stage in our company's development. The latest financials have exceeded expectations, and it's time for a major expansion." Mariana watched her husband with quiet pride. 25 years of marriage, and he still knew how to capture the attention of any audience. She remembered how they'd started this business, how many nights they'd spent over business plans, how excited they'd been over their first successes. "We plan to open 3 new lines of business in the next quarter," Eduardo continued, incorporating the presentation. "This will require expanding the staff by about 50 people. Mariana will lead the candidate selection process." She nodded, making notes in her notepad. Her flawless manicure tapped softly on the glossy surface of the desk in time with her husband's words. The new project demanded full commitment, but Mariana was used to challenging tasks. After the meeting, when most of the staff had dispersed, Eduardo approached his wife. His hand rested on her shoulder, warm and familiar. "You look lovely today," he pronounced, examining her elegant ivory dress. "Thank you, darling." "You too," Mariana smiled, gathering her papers. "You haven't forgotten about our evening?" "Of course not. I made reservations at Casa Verde for 8 o'clock. It was their favorite restaurant, where they went on special days. Today was the anniversary of their first meeting, a date that only Mariana remembered, but Eduardo always agreed to celebrate the day. The day flew by in a whirlwind of meetings and phone calls. Mariana had time to review the first resumes of potential candidates, hold a video conference with partners from Europe, and talk on the phone with her daughter. Camille was excited about her new clothing collection and was going to come over the weekend to show her sketches. In the evening, Mariana returned home to change for dinner. Their penthouse suite greeted her with its usual quiet and cozy atmosphere. She chose a black cocktail dress, simple but elegant, just the way Eduardo liked it. The final touch was a drop of her favorite perfume on her wrist. At the restaurant, they were greeted like old friends. Their table was by the window, overlooking the evening city. The waiter brought their favorite wine, red, aged, with notes of vanilla and black currant. "Here's to us," Eduardo said, raising his glass. "And here's to new perspectives." Mariana smiled, looking at her husband over the top of her glass. In the dim candlelight, his face seemed younger, reminiscent of the young man she'd met 27 years ago at a university party. "Are you worried about the extension?" she asked when they were brought appetizers. "Not if you stick around," he replied, covering her hand with his. "We've always been a great team." The evening passed in a warm, cozy atmosphere. They discussed future plans, recalled funny moments from the past, and talked about Camille and her success in the fashion business. Mariana felt absolutely happy. They returned home around midnight. Eduardo helped his wife take off her coat, his fingers lingering on her shoulders for a moment. Mariana turned to him, and their lips met in a tender kiss. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," she whispered. In the bedroom, Mariana lingered by the dressing table, removing her jewelry. The mirror reflected a picture of them together, she and Eduardo on a yacht during last year's vacation in Greece, both smiling, tanned, happy. As she fell asleep, Mariana thought about the upcoming job interviews. She had to find the right people, those who would share the company's values and become part of their big team. She couldn't know that very soon these new people would turn her whole life upside down. She slept peacefully that night, unaware of the changes to come. The lights of Sao Paulo twinkled outside her window, and the clock on her bedside table counted down the minutes until her perfect world began to crumble. It was a chilly morning. Mariana woke up earlier than usual to prepare for her upcoming job interview. She had carefully chosen her outfit, a slim pantsuit the color of wet asphalt and an ivory silk blouse. Her movements were precise, calibrated by years of morning rituals. Eduardo was already waiting for her in the kitchen, watching the news on his tablet. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the space. "The first candidates will arrive by 9, he said, without taking his eyes off the screen. "Security has sent preliminary reports on all applicants." Mariana nodded, pouring herself coffee into her favorite china cup, a gift from her daughter from her last trip to Paris. "I went through all the resumes last night. There are some very promising candidates." They arrived at the office together. The security guard nodded respectfully, opening the doors in front of them. Mariana caught her reflection in the mirrored surface of the elevator, stern, trim, ready for the big day. The first to arrive for the interview was Juliana Mendoza, a tall brunette with impeccable posture and an attentive look in her brown eyes. Her resume was impressive: 3 college degrees, experience in international companies, fluency in 4 languages. "Have a seat," Mariana pointed to the chair opposite. "Tell me, why are you interested in our company?" Juliana spoke confidently, her answers clear and thoughtful. Eduardo listened attentively, occasionally making notes in his notebook. Mariana noticed him leaning forward slightly as Juliana talked about her latest project. Juliana was followed by the other candidates. Regina Cardoso, a young professional with a genuine smile and a slightly nervous laugh. Sofia Macedo, a reserved woman with a cold stare and an impressive track record. Each had their own strengths. Each could bring something new to the company. By lunchtime, Mariana was feeling slightly tired. Eduardo suggested a break and ordered lunch for them in the meeting room. "What do you think of the first candidates?" he asked, unfolding his napkin. "Juliana Mendoza stands out," Mariana replied, sipping her mineral water. "But I'm a little wary of her ambitiousness." "That's exactly the kind of person the company needs." Eduardo leaned back in his chair. "She definitely knows what she wants." After lunch, the interviews continued. Mariana watched each candidate carefully, noting not only their professional qualities, but also how they held themselves, how they reacted to unexpected questions. In the evening, reviewing the day's notes, she compiled a list of those recommended for admission. Juliana Mendoza topped it, followed by Sofia Macedo and Regina Cardoso. Eduardo approved her choices without objection. The next day, the onboarding process began. Mariana personally gave each of them a short tour of the office. Juliana listened especially attentively to her account of the company's history, asked pertinent questions, and showed genuine interest. "You have an amazing company," she said as they stopped at the panoramic window in the lobby. "One can sense the amount of love and labor put into it." Mariana smiled, flattered by those words. She was truly proud of what she and Eduardo had created. A week later, the new employees were already getting up to speed. Mariana noticed Juliana staying late, always impeccably dressed, always ready to take on extra tasks. Her enthusiasm was contagious. The other newcomers tried to keep up as well. One morning, Walking past her husband's office, Mariana heard Juliana laughing. She paused for a moment, listening to the voices outside the door. Eduardo was animatedly explaining something. Juliana listened attentively, occasionally inserting an accurate remark. At that moment, Mariana felt a slight unease, but immediately pushed it away. After all, it had been her idea to hire Juliana. She herself had noted her professionalism and determination. Days turned into weeks. The company was growing. New projects demanded more and more attention. Mariana was busy coordinating the various departments, holding meetings, solving current issues. Eduardo stayed at work more and more often, explaining it by the importance of the moment for the development of the business. One evening, going home, Mariana saw Juliana leaving Eduardo's office. She had a faint smile on her lips and was holding some documents in her hands. Their gazes met, and Juliana nodded politely. "Good evening, Mrs. Bertulli. It's been a beautiful day, hasn't it?" Mariana nodded in agreement, noting to herself how gracefully Juliana's new dress fit her, emphasizing her slender figure. At that moment, Eduardo came out of the study, adjusting his tie as he went. "Ah, darling, are you still here?" He gave Mariana a quick kiss on the cheek. "Sorry, I'll be late again today. I have to finish my presentation for tomorrow's meeting." Mariana drove home alone. The empty apartment was unaccustomedly quiet. She turned on some music, trying to fill the space with sounds, but it didn't help get rid of the strange feeling of unease that was beginning to brew somewhere deep inside. As she lay in bed, she remembered Juliana's gaze, confident, slightly condescending. Something in that look disturbed her, but Mariana could not say exactly what it was. She didn't fall asleep until the morning, and when she woke up, she thought it was all just a play of her imagination. It had been a month since the new employees had joined the company. Mariana noticed how the atmosphere in the office had changed. There was a new dynamic, especially when Juliana Mendoza was around. Her heels clicked with confidence on the marble floor of the corridors, and her short business dress invariably attracted the attention of the male staff. That morning, Mariana lingered at the coffee machine in the common area, ostensibly choosing between a cappuccino and an Americano. In reality, she was watching Juliana interact with her co-workers. She gave each one a special smile, each one attention, but her gaze lingered most of all on Eduardo as he passed by. "Good morning, Mr. Bertulli." Juliana's voice sounded soft, almost intimate. "I have prepared the report on the new project as you requested." Eduardo stopped beside her, and Mariana noted the way he automatically adjusted his tie, a gesture she had known for 25 years. It was a gesture that always appeared when he was nervous or particularly interested in something. "Very good, Juliana. Bring it into my office this afternoon. We'll discuss the details." Mariana took a sip of her coffee, which proved too hot. She set the cup on the table, noticing that her hands were shaking slightly. At that moment, the new CFO, Rafael Costa, who had joined the company along with the rest of the staff, approached her. "Miss Bertulli, may I ask you a few questions about the quarterly report?" His voice was deep and calm. Rafael's demeanor was always impeccable. Suits fit perfectly. Every movement was calibrated. He held out the file folder to her, and their fingers touched for a moment. "Of course, Rafael. Let's make our way to my office." On the way, she heard Juliana's laughter again, a ringing, confident laugh, as if she had every right to be here, in this company, in this life. Mariana squeezed the folder a little harder than necessary. In her office, she tried to concentrate on the numbers Rafael was showing her, but her thoughts kept returning to the scene at the coffee machine. She remembered how Eduardo had been mentioning Juliana more often in conversations lately. "Mrs. Bertulli?" Rafael's voice brought her back to reality. "Do you agree with my conclusions?" "Yes, of course," she tried to smile. "Your analysis is very accurate." After lunch, Mariana deliberately lingered in the hallway outside her husband's office. Juliana entered it at exactly 2 o'clock, as agreed. Through the frosted glass, Mariana could see their silhouettes. They stood too close to each other for a simple working conversation. In the evening at home, Eduardo was unusually lively. He talked about new projects, about the prospects for the company's development, and Juliana's name appeared too often in these stories. "She's really talented," he said as he paced the living room. "Such fresh ideas, such an out-of-the-box approach." Mariana stirred her tea mechanically, watching the sugar dissolve. She remembered that Eduardo had never discussed other employees with such enthusiasm before. The next morning, she was especially careful about her outfit. A dark blue dress that emphasized her figure, a pearl necklace, high-heeled shoes. The mirror reflected a beautiful woman, but Mariana saw the first signs of age. Slight wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, barely noticeable gray in her dark hair. At the office, she ran into Juliana in the elevator. The scent of expensive perfume emanated from the young woman. Mariana recognized the brand. She had once used it herself. "You look lovely, Mrs. Bertulli," Juliana said with a smile that didn't affect her eyes. "That dress suits you very well." Mariana nodded in response, noting how flawlessly the white blouse fit Juliana, how elegantly it emphasized her youth and freshness. At that moment, the elevator doors opened and Juliana gracefully floated out into the corridor, leaving behind a trail of perfume and a vague sense of unease. The day stretched on slowly. Mariana tried to concentrate on her work, but she kept catching herself listening to the sounds outside the door, trying to catch Juliana's voice or her husband's footsteps. After lunch, she noticed Eduardo and Juliana leaving the office together, ostensibly to meet a client. In the evening, Eduardo called to say he would be late. Important negotiations were running late. His voice sounded a little different than usual. Or was it just her imagination? Mariana put the phone down and looked at her reflection in the screen. Something had changed in her life, something subtle but important. She'd noticed a lot of little things these days, the way Eduardo checked his phone more often than usual, the way his expression changed when Juliana entered his office, the way he was more careful about his appearance. He now carefully chose his suit every morning and had recently bought a new perfume, a fresher and more youthful scent. Rafael Costa seemed to notice these changes as well. Once, as they worked together on a financial report, he remarked cautiously, "You know, Mrs. Bertulli, sometimes people don't appreciate what they have, chasing after phantom dreams." She looked up at him, trying to understand the meaning behind those words, but his face remained impenetrable. Only in the depths of his brown eyes flashed something like sympathy. That evening, Mariana stayed in the office longer than usual. The staff had already left. Only the lights were still on in Eduardo's office. She was walking slowly down the hall when she heard voices. Juliana was saying something in a low, purring tone, and Eduardo was answering her in an unusually soft, almost gentle way. Mariana froze in place, unable to move forward or backward. Her heart was beating so loudly that it seemed its pounding should be audible in the silence of the hallway. She just stood there in the semi-darkness and listened to her perfect world crumble. After that night in the office hallway, Mariana couldn't find a place for herself. She mechanically performed the usual activities, drinking coffee in the morning, holding meetings, signing documents, but it was as if something inside her had snapped. Every time she heard Juliana's heels clicking on the marble floor, her fingers clenched into fists so hard that her nails dug into her palms. She woke earlier than usual that morning. Eduardo was still asleep, and she stared at his face for a long time, so familiar and suddenly almost alien. New wrinkles appeared near his eyes, but they were not from laughter as before, but from some inner tension. Leaving the bedroom, Mariana headed for the kitchen. Her hands automatically performed the usual actions, pouring coffee, pouring water, taking out cups. The ringing of the phone cut through the morning silence. It was Paula, her longtime friend. "Mariana, you've been kind of weird lately." Paula's voice sounded concerned. "Why don't we meet after work today?" Mariana agreed, realizing she couldn't keep it all in anymore. Paula had known her for 20 years, had been there for her in all the important moments of her life, good and bad. At the office, the day began with another meeting. Juliana sat across from Eduardo, her blouse unbuttoned one button more than was required. Mariana noticed her husband's gaze dwelled on that detail now and again. "I have a proposal to optimize the new project." Juliana's voice sounded honeyed. "Mr. Bertulli, perhaps we can discuss it after the meeting." Eduardo nodded without even glancing at his wife. Mariana clutched the file folder so tightly that her knuckles turned white. At that moment she felt Rafael Costa's scrutinizing gaze on her. After the meeting she heard Eduardo talking on the phone, quietly, almost in a whisper, turning away to the window. "Yes, of course. No, I can't today. I'll try to get out tomorrow." In the evening, Mariana met Paula in a small restaurant where they often went together. Her friend looked elegant in her gray suit, but in her eyes she read worry. "What's going on, Marie?" she asked as soon as the wine was brought to them. "I can see you're not yourself." Mariana brought the glass to her lips, her hand trembling slightly. "Remember the new employee I told you about, Juliana?" She began to speak and the words flowed, about how Eduardo had changed, about overheard conversations, about looks, gestures, casual touches. Paula listened intently, occasionally frowning her eyebrows. "You know," she finally said, "in situations like this you need facts, not conjecture. I know a man, a private detective, Antonio Cesar. He's the best in the business." Mariana shook her head. "No, it's too much. I can't." "You can and you should." Paula covered her hand with her own. "You have a right to know the truth. And then it's not just about your marriage, it's about the company." At that moment, a waiter came to their table with a new bottle of wine. Mariana noticed the way he looked at her trembling hands and tried to pull herself together. "Give me his number," she finally said. Returning home, Mariana found the apartment empty. On the kitchen table lay a note written in familiar handwriting. "Important meeting with investors. Don't expect me for dinner." She crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash. The next day at the office, she couldn't concentrate on her work. Every time the door opened, she flinched, expecting to see Juliana. Around noon, Rafael walked into her office with some paperwork. "Mrs. Bertulli," he began, but then fell silent, looking at her carefully. "Are you all right?" "Yes, of course." She tried to smile. "Just a lot of work." "You know," he took a seat on the edge of the table, "sometimes it's good to get an outside perspective. And remember, you're not alone." There was something in his voice that made her look up. Raphael was looking at her with an unfamiliar warmth, and for the first time in days, she felt like she could trust someone. That evening, sitting in her car in the underground parking lot, Mariana pulled out the business card Paula had given her. "Antonio Cesar, private investigator," was the simple black lettering on a white background. She stared at those letters for a long time before she finally dialed the number. "Good evening." The voice on the receiver sounded calm and professional. "What can I do for you?" "I need to follow up on someone." Her voice trembled. "Two, to be exact." "Meet me tomorrow morning at 10, the detective replied. "I'll send the address by message." She hardly slept that night. Eduardo returned late, smelling of expensive wine and unfamiliar perfume. He went straight into the shower and then went to bed without even looking at her. Mariana lay next to him, counting the beats of her heart and thinking about how her life had turned into a detective novel. In the morning, she put on her favorite suit, the same one she had once worn when she signed the company's founding documents. It had always given her confidence, and now she needed it the most. Before leaving, she looked at herself in the mirror. Pale face, tense look, tightly compressed lips. She adjusted her collar and left the house, preparing for a meeting that could change her whole life. Antonio Caesar's office was in an old building with a worn sign on the door. Mariana climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor, each step difficult to take. The detective met her in a small office filled with old-fashioned furniture. His appearance was in keeping with the furnishings. Gray suit, attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, neatly trimmed graying mustache. "Have a seat, Mrs. Bertulli." He pointed to a worn leather chair. "Tell me everything in order." Mariana pulled from her purse a photograph of Eduardo and Juliana taken at the last corporate party. Her fingers trembled slightly as she handed the picture to the detective. "I need to know everything." Her voice sounded quieter than usual. "Where they go, who they meet, what they talk about." Antonio Caesar nodded slowly, making notes in a small notebook. "I'll need information on their daily routines, work and residence addresses, license plates." Mariana spent the next hour answering the detective's questions. Each answer seemed to tear a part of her soul out, but she forced herself to speak, clearly to the point, not letting her emotions take over. "I'll start work today," Caesar said as he walked her to the door. "You'll have your first report in 3 days." Back at the office, Mariana ran into Raphael in the elevator. He gave her an attentive look. "You look very pale, Mrs. Bertulli. Perhaps you'd like to have coffee with me." She agreed, realizing she needed a moment's respite. They sat at a far table in the cafeteria, and Raphael brought her a cup of strong espresso. "You know," he began, stirring his coffee, "sometimes you just need to weather the storm." Mariana looked up at him, trying to figure out what was behind those words. At that moment, Eduardo and Juliana entered the cafeteria. They didn't notice Mariana and Raphael, sitting down at a table by the window. Juliana was talking animatedly, leaning closer to Eduardo than propriety required. The 3 days dragged on interminably. Mariana woke up every morning with a heaviness in her chest, mechanically performed her duties in the office, trying not to meet the eyes of either her husband or Juliana. At night she lay awake, listening to the breathing of Eduardo, who now seemed a complete stranger. Antonio Caesar called exactly 3 days later as promised. "I have information. Shall we meet at the same place?" In his office now lay a thick folder of photos and reports. The detective methodically spread the pictures out on the desk. "They meet almost every day after work. This here is a restaurant downtown. This is a hotel on the outskirts. And here is a private club for board members of large companies." Mariana stared at the photos, feeling as if each picture was putting a nail in the coffin of her marriage. One showed Eduardo gently putting his arm around Juliana's waist. Another showed them kissing outside a restaurant. "There's something else." Caesar pulled out a tape recorder. "I recorded their conversation in the restaurant. Would you like to hear it?" Mariana shook her head. Seeing the pictures was painful enough. Hearing their voices, she wasn't ready. "Keep watching," she said, standing up. "I need to know everything." That evening she sat in her office for a long time, poring over the photos. Dusk was thickening outside the window, the office gradually emptying. Suddenly the door opened. It was Raphael. "It's late, Mrs. Bertulli," he said softly. "May I take you home?" She wanted to refuse, but she caught his gaze, warm, understanding, without a shadow of judgment or pity. And suddenly she realized she didn't want to go back to the empty apartment alone. "Thank you, Raphael," she began to pack her bag. "That would be very helpful." They barely spoke on the road. Raphael put on some quiet music, and Mariana felt some semblance of peace for the first time in days. At the driveway, he got out to open the door for her. "If you need anything, any help, just a conversation, I'm always here for you." The next day came a message from Caesar. "Urgent information. Come immediately." His office was now filled with new photographs. In them, Eduardo was dating another woman, Regina Cardoso, also a recent addition to the company. That's not all. The detective spread out a few more pictures. Here he is with Sofia Macedo. Your husband seems to have a very, active social life. Mariana stared at the photos, unable to believe her eyes. Eduardo, always so proper, so impeccable in her eyes, was a completely different person. She remembered how proud she had been of him, how she had believed every word he said, how she had defended him to her friends when they insinuated that he paid too much attention to the young women in his office. Back at the office, she ran into Juliana in the hallway. She looked impeccable new suit, perfect hair, confident smile. Mariana looked at her with new eyes, not just her husband's mistress, but one of many, as deceived as herself. In the evening, Paula called. "How are you? Any news from the detective?" "Come to my place." Mariana heard her voice shake. "I need to talk to someone." An hour later, they were sitting in the kitchen of her apartment. Paula was silently looking through the pictures, shaking her head every now and then. "You know," she finally said, "maybe it's for the best. Now you know the truth." Mariana looked out the window at the lights of the evening city. Somewhere out there, in one of the restaurants or hotels, her husband is now meeting another mistress. And each of them thinks she is special, the only one, the one. How bitterly wrong they all are. After the detective's revelations, Mariana felt devastated. Every morning she spent an extra half hour in front of the mirror, carefully applying makeup, trying to hide the traces of sleepless nights. In the office, she tried to keep a straight face, smile at her co-workers, pretend that everything was fine, though inside she clenched every time she saw her husband with one of his mistresses. That morning she arrived earlier than usual. The office was still empty. Only the cleaning lady was wiping down the glass partitions. Mariana loved these moments of silence, when she could be alone with herself without the mask of a businesswoman and a happy wife. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Raphael stood on the threshold with 2 glasses of coffee in his hands. "Good morning, Mrs. Bertulli. I noticed the light in your office and thought you might need this." He held out one of the glasses to her. Mariana accepted the coffee, noting that it was just the way she liked it. Double espresso with no sugar. Raphael remembered such details. "Thank you, Raphael, and call me Mariana when we're alone." He perched on the edge of her desk, his eyes scrutinizing her face. "Mariana, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, not about work." She felt her pulse quicken. Raphael was an attractive man, tall, trim, with a slight gray on his temples that only added to his charm. But it wasn't just his looks. He had an inner strength and a special kind of reliability. "I know about the situation with your husband," he continued quietly, "and I see how you are suffering. It's not fair." Mariana wanted to reply something, but the words stuck in her throat. Raphael gently took her hand in his. "Let me show you that life can be different. Have dinner with me tonight." It was unexpected. Mariana felt the color flood her cheeks. "Raphael, I don't think that's a good idea. Just dinner, Mariana. Nothing more than that. You deserve at least a few hours of normal human companionship." At that moment, voices were heard outside the door. The office was beginning to fill with employees. Raphael stood up. "Think about my offer. I'll be expecting you at 8 o'clock at the Terrace Jardine." All day, Mariana couldn't concentrate on her work. She caught herself constantly glancing at her watch, counting the minutes until evening. At lunchtime, Paula called, and Mariana told her about Raphael's invitation. "Go," her friend said firmly. "You have a right to be happy. Your husband obviously doesn't see fit to be faithful. Why should you act like a nun?" "But it's wrong." "What's wrong is what your husband is doing. And you're just going out to dinner with a decent man who shows you genuine consideration." After talking to Paula, Mariana opened the mail from the detective. New photos showed Eduardo leaving the jewelry store with a small box in his hands. The next shot captured him giving the contents of the box to Juliana, a dainty diamond bracelet. Something snapped inside Mariana. She remembered how Eduardo had given her a similar bracelet 20 years ago, a gift she had been immensely happy about, thinking it was a symbol of their special love. Now it appeared that such gifts were just a way for him to keep another mistress. At 7 o'clock that evening, she called Raphael. "I'd like to have dinner with you." His voice sounded warm. "I'm very glad. May I send a car for you?" Terrace Jardine was located on the roof of one of the old buildings in the center of the city. Raphael was waiting for her at the entrance with a bouquet of white orchids. He helped her out of the car, and his hand lingered on her waist for a moment, a gesture so natural yet so exciting. The table was set impeccably. Snow-white tablecloth, crystal glasses, candles. The waiter brought the menu and wine list. Raphael ordered champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. The conversation flowed easily and casually. Raphael was a great conversationalist, attentive, witty, able to talk about any subject. He talked about his travels, about his favorite books, about music, and Mariana caught herself smiling for the first time in weeks, sincerely and freely. "You're an amazing woman, Mariana," he said when dessert was brought to them. "Smart, strong, beautiful. Too bad your husband doesn't appreciate that." She lowered her eyes. "Perhaps I'm just boring him." "No," Raphael covered her hand with his. "It's not about you. Some men just can't appreciate a real treasure even when it's right in front of them." After dinner, they stepped out onto the terrace. The evening air was fragrant with the scent of blossoming trees. Raphael stood beside her, so secure and calm. Mariana felt her heart begin to beat faster. "I'll walk you home," he said quietly. They stopped in the driveway of her house. Raphael turned to her. "Thank you for this evening, Mariana." She looked up and met his gaze, warm, understanding, tinged with something more. He leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't pull away. His lips were soft and gentle, the kiss tentative and chaste. "Good night," he whispered, pulling away. The apartment was dark and empty. A message from Eduardo was flashing on the answering machine. He was late again for an important meeting. Mariana stood at the window, fingering the lips that still held the warmth of Raphael's kiss. For the first time in a long time, she felt alive. After kissing Raphael, Mariana hadn't been able to find a place to be. She woke up in the morning with conflicting feelings, guilt mixed with the memory of the warmth of his lips, anger at her husband intertwined with her own confusion. Eduardo didn't seem to notice anything. He was staying late at the office more and more often, or leaving for business meetings. That morning she received a message from Antonio Cesar. "Come right away. There is important information." Mariana canceled all appointments and drove to the detective's office. In his office there was a new blackboard with dozens of photographs hung on it, connected by red threads. "Have a seat, Mrs. Bertulli." Cesar handed her a glass of water. "What I have discovered, you need to see sitting down." He began laying out the photographs on the table. The first showed Eduardo dining with Juliana at an expensive restaurant. The second showed him leaving the hotel with Regina Cardoso. In the third, he was sitting in a cafe with Sofia Macedo, their hands touching over the table. "These happen in parallel," the detective explained, pointing to the dates of the pictures. "Your husband meets with them on a specific schedule, Juliana on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Regina on Wednesdays, and Sofia on Fridays." Mariana stared at the photographs, feeling her fingers go numb. In each picture, Eduardo looked in love, tender and attentive with each woman. Each had been given gifts, jewelry, expensive handbags, perfume. "There's one more thing." Caesar turned on the recorder. Eduardo's voice came out. "You are special, the only one. I've never felt this way about anyone." Those words, the very words he had once spoken to her. The recording continued, and the same phrases were repeated in conversations with different women. And this is the interesting part. The detective pulled out a new stack of photos. The traces lead to offshore accounts. Your husband transfers substantial sums of money into each of these women's names. Mariana picked up the bank statements. The numbers jumped before her eyes. Hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred through shell companies. He's using company money? Her voice sounded hoarse. Yes, and he does it quite skillfully. But I found traces of all the transactions. Back in the office, Mariana locked herself in her study. She opened the corporate records, now noticing things that had escaped her attention before. Strange transfers, unexplained expenses, inflated estimates for projects his mistresses were handling. There was a knock at the door. It was Raphael. "Mariana, you didn't answer my message. I was worried." She looked up at him with eyes full of tears. "He's not just cheating me. He's stealing from the company." Raphael closed the door carefully and sat down next to her. "Tell me everything." She showed him documents, photographs, bank statements. His face grew more and more serious. "This is a serious crime, Mariana. As CFO, it is my duty to inform the board of directors." "No," she shook her head. "Not yet, no. I need time to think about it." He took her hand in his. "Of course, but remember, you're not alone in this situation." In the evening, Mariana didn't go home. She asked the driver to take her to Paula's. Her friend met her with a bottle of wine and a willingness to listen. "I don't know what's worse," Mariana said, sitting on Paula's couch. "That he's sleeping with these women or that he's using company money to buy their loyalty." Paula poured her more wine. "What about Raphael? How do you feel about him?" Mariana closed her eyes. "He's the only one I feel safe around, but now is not the time to think about that." At that moment the phone rang. It was Cesar. "Mrs. Bertulli, there is new information. I followed Juliana. She's meeting with a lawyer specializing in corporate law." Mariana went cold. "You think—" "Yes, it looks like she's cooking up some kind of plan, and it has to do with your company." At night, lying in Paula's guest bedroom, Mariana couldn't sleep. Pictures flashed before her eyes. Happy moments with Eduardo, their work together to create the company, the birth of their daughter, family holidays. And now, it was all a lie. In the morning, she received a message from Raphael. "I'm here if you need help or just to talk." Those simple words gave her strength. She showered, dressed carefully, and drove to the office. In the elevator, she ran into Sofia Macedo. She looked impeccable in her expensive suit. Of course, now Mariana knew whose money had been used to buy it. Sofia gave her a duty smile, unaware that her secret was out. In the hallway, Mariana saw Regina Cardoso talking to Eduardo. The young woman was blushing and laughing, clearly flirting. Eduardo was smiling at her just as he had smiled at Juliana yesterday, as he had smiled at Sofia the day before. In her office, Mariana opened her laptop and began to look through the company documents more carefully. Now she could see the pattern, how Eduardo created fictitious projects, appointed his mistresses to key positions, transferred money through shell companies. Her musings were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Juliana. She entered with a confident gait, holding some documents in her hands. "Mrs. Bertulli, I need your approval of this contract." Mariana looked at her and wondered if Juliana knew about other women. Does she think she is special, the only one? Does she believe Eduardo's sweet words as much as she once believed her own? After all the revelations, Mariana's life became a complicated chess game. Every morning she came to the office, greeted her husband, nodded to his mistresses as if nothing had changed. But inside her, everything burned with the realization of betrayal and lies. Only Raphael's presence helped her keep her balance. That morning she received a message from him. "Let me invite you to dinner. There's an idea I'd like to discuss." Mariana stared at the screen of the phone for a long time before answering in agreement. The day stretched on interminably. Eduardo peeked into her office close to lunchtime. "Darling, I have an important meeting with investors today. Don't expect me for dinner." She nodded without lifting her eyes from the papers. She knew now that important meeting meant a date with one of her mistresses. On the schedule today, it was Sofia Macedo's turn. At 7 o'clock, Raphael was waiting for her at the entrance to a small restaurant in the old part of town. The place was not the kind of place where business people of their circle went, cozy, with live music and a homey atmosphere. "This place makes the best homemade pasta in town," he said, pulling back a chair for her. "And no one we know." Mariana appreciated his concern for privacy. In recent days, she'd become all too aware of the stares of those around her, as if everyone knew about her family drama. The waiter brought the menu and a bottle of red wine. Raphael had a knack for creating an atmosphere of comfort and calm, a quality she was increasingly appreciating in him. "How are you doing?" he asked when they were served appetizers. "Honestly, I don't know." Mariana sipped her wine. "Every day I wake up and play the role of successful businesswoman and happy wife, and everything inside is dying." Raphael covered her hand with his. "You don't have to go through this alone." His touch sent goosebumps running down her skin. Mariana looked up and met his gaze, warm, understanding, tinged with something more than sympathy. The conversation flowed easily, moving from work to art, from music to travel. Raphael talked about his life in Europe, about classical music concerts, about small restaurants in Roman alleyways. "You know what I noticed about you the first day?" he asked when they were brought dessert. "Your strength. You seem so fragile, but inside you're a steel rod." Mariana felt the color flood her cheeks. "I don't feel strong right now." "That's why you are even stronger. You keep fighting despite the pain." After dinner, they went outside. The evening was warm and the air smelled of blooming acacia trees. Raphael suggested a walk, and Mariana agreed. She didn't want to go back to the empty apartment. They walked along the old streets, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, their hands touched, and Raphael gently intertwined their fingers. This simple gesture seemed more intimate to Mariana than any kiss. "Do you know what I'm thinking?" Raphael said, stopping at the ancient fountain. "About how unfair life is. A woman like you deserves to be loved, valued, protected." Mariana felt her heart begin to beat faster. "Raphael, I can't. I'm still married." "To a man who doesn't appreciate you." His voice grew quieter. "To a man who betrays not only your love, but your trust as a business partner." He was right, and that made it hurt even more. Mariana felt tears come to her eyes. Raphael gently drew her to him, cradling her in his arms. He smelled of expensive cologne and something subtly familiar. "Shh," he whispered, stroking her back. "It's going to be okay. I'm here for you." She lifted her face, meeting his gaze. There was so much tenderness and care in his eyes that it took her breath away. Raphael leaned toward her slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't pull away. The kiss was gentle, tentative, not at all like their first. There was no rush or passion in it, just warmth and some marvelous sense of rightness. When they finally pulled away from each other, Mariana felt like a different person. It was as if that kiss had erased something old and opened the way for something new. "I'll walk you home," Raphael said, taking her hand again. At the entryway, they stopped. Mariana knew she should enter the apartment where everything reminded her of her 25 years of marriage to Eduardo, but now those memories seemed distant and unreal. "Thank you for this evening," she said quietly. Raphael touched her cheek. "This is only the beginning, Mariana, if you'll allow it." She watched him walk away and felt a strange mix of emotions: guilt, joy, fear, hope. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Eduardo. "Running late. Don't wait up." Mariana grinned. Before, such a message would have made her heart clench with pain. Now she only felt tired and strangely relieved. As she walked up to the apartment, she thought about feeling alive for the first time in a long time. In the bedroom, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time, looking at her reflection. The woman looking back at her from the mirror looked different. There was a sparkle in her eyes, her cheeks flushed, her shoulders squared. This was no longer the Mariana who blindly believed in a perfect marriage. She was a woman ready to start a new chapter of her life. After the evening with Raphael, Mariana had spent a sleepless night contemplating her situation. Morning light found her sitting in an armchair in the living room with a cup of cooled tea. Eduardo had not returned home, sending a message that he had stayed at the country house after a late meeting. She knew now that country house meant the hotel room with Sofia Macedo. The phone vibrated, a message from Detective Cesar, new information, very urgent. Mariana glanced at her watch. 7 in the morning. What could be so important? The detective's office smelled of fresh coffee and cigarettes. Cesar looked tired, as if he'd been up all night too. "I noticed some strange activity last night." He spread the new photos in front of her. "Juliana Mendoza met with a lawyer specializing in corporate law. Afterwards, she went to a restaurant where your husband was waiting for her." Mariana scrutinized the pictures. In one of them, Juliana was holding some documents, showing them to Eduardo. "That's not all," the detective continued. "I've tracked the movement of funds. In the last week, about $2 million has been withdrawn from the company's accounts through shell companies." He showed her the bank statements. Mariana felt herself grow cold inside. The amounts were enormous. "It looks like they're cooking up some kind of plan." Cesar tapped his finger on the photo. "And from the looks of it, it has to do with the rights to the company." Back in the office, Mariana locked herself in her office. She opened the safe and pulled out the company's incorporation papers. 25 years ago, she and Eduardo had started the business together, investing equal shares. Now she owned 40% of the stock, Eduardo 51%, and the rest was divided among small shareholders. There was a knock on the door. It was Raphael. "I brought the financial reports you asked for," he said as he entered. Closing the door, he added more quietly, "Is something wrong?" Mariana showed him the paperwork from the detective. Raphael's face became serious. "It looks like preparations for a hostile takeover. They may try to force you out of the company." "But how? I have 40% of the shares." "There are various ways. For example, through a sham bankruptcy or a forced buyout." "Mrs. Bertulli, your daughter is on the line. She says it's urgent." Mariana picked up the phone. Camilla's voice sounded agitated. "Mom, can you explain why my father is transferring some of his shares in the company to me?" Mariana went cold. "What do you mean?" "I just got a call from the notary. Said my father wants to sign over 20% of the shares to me. What's going on?" "Honey, don't sign any documents until I figure it out," Mariana tried to speak calmly. "Promise?" After speaking to her daughter, she leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. Eduardo's plan was now becoming clear: to transfer some of the shares to his daughter so that he could have control over them through her. Raphael, who had been silently watching the conversation, sat down on the edge of the table. "We need to act quickly. I can get in touch with a reliable lawyer." "No," Mariana shook her head. "I have to talk to my daughter first. She needs to know the truth." She spent the entire day as if in a fog, mechanically signing documents and making appointments. After lunch, a new message from the detective arrived. Pictures of Eduardo leaving the bank with a briefcase. Juliana followed him holding some papers. In the evening, Paula called, "How are you? You look terrible at the last few meetings." "He's trying to take the company away from me." Mariana felt her voice shake. "Using our daughter." "Scumbag," Paula sounded furious. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to let him destroy what we've spent 25 years building." After her conversation with her friend, Mariana sat in the darkness of her office for a long time. Behind the glass walls, the office was gradually emptying. Only Eduardo's office light was still on. She saw Juliana enter, and they leaned over some papers. Her phone vibrated softly, a message from Rafael. "I'm still in the office. Need any help?" Mariana smiled. His concern warmed her heart. She'd often caught herself thinking of him the last few days, of his gentle touch, the warmth of his gaze. But now was not the time for romance. Suddenly Juliana's laughter came from Eduardo's study, loud and triumphant. Mariana went to the window, looking out at the nighttime Sao Paulo. Somewhere out there, in one of the luxury hotels, Sofia Macedo was waiting for her turn to go out with her husband. Elsewhere, Regina Cardoso was checking the balance of her secret account. The phone in her purse buzzed. This time it was the detective calling, "Mrs. Bertulli, they've scheduled an appointment with the notary for tomorrow. It looks like they're going to formalize the transfer of the shares." Mariana looked at her reflection in the dark glass. The woman looking back at her from there looked tired but determined. It was time to end this game. She dialed her daughter's number. "Camille, we need to meet. Right now. There are things you need to know about your father." It was a sweltering evening. Mariana was sitting in her office going over some papers when there was a knock on the door. Juliana Mendoza stood on the threshold, impeccably dressed, perfectly styled, and a cold smile on her painted lips. "Good evening, Mrs. Bertulli." There was an ill-concealed arrogance in her voice. "We need to talk." Mariana gestured to the chair across from her desk. Juliana lowered herself gracefully into it, placing an expensive leather folder on her lap. Her new diamond bracelet, a gift from Eduardo, glinted dimly in the light of the desk lamp. "I saw you last week," Juliana began without preamble, "at the Terrace Jardine restaurant with our finance director. A very romantic place, wasn't it?" Mariana felt her fingers involuntarily clench into a fist under the table. She forced herself to remain outwardly calm. "So what?" Juliana opened the folder and pulled out some pictures. "And this is you and him kissing at the fountain. What do you think your daughter will say when she finds out her mother is cheating on her father?" Now there was an ill-concealed triumph in her voice. She put the photos on the table and pulled some document out of a folder. "I have an offer. You sign a waiver of your share in the company, and these photos will never see the light of day. Especially Camille will never see them." Mariana looked at the photos. They were professionally taken from different angles. Someone had clearly been following her that evening. "And how long have you been planning this little combination?" she asked, raising her eyes to Juliana. "What do you mean?" "About how you seduced my husband to get to the company. About how you watched me, waiting for a moment of weakness. About how you drew up the stock transfer documents." Juliana lost her confidence for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I have proof of your infidelity. Eduardo will be crushed to learn of your betrayal." Mariana slowly opened a desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "How about this?" She began to lay the pictures out on the table, one by one. Eduardo and Juliana in a restaurant. Eduardo and Sofia at the hotel. Eduardo and Regina at a private club. What is it?" Juliana's voice trembled. "Documentation that my husband is seeing 3 women at the same time, and they all work for our company." Mariana continued laying out the photos. "And these are bank statements. The money he transferred to you all through shell companies. Using corporate funds for personal use is a serious offense, don't you think?" Juliana's face turned white as chalk. She grabbed one of the photos. It showed Eduardo kissing Sofia Macedo outside the hotel. "He said I was the one," she whispered. "Swore he'd never loved anyone so much." "He said the same words to all of you." Mariana pulled out a tape recorder and turned on the tape. Eduardo's voice repeated the same declarations of love to different women. Juliana sat motionless, looking at the pictures. Her perfect mask cracked, revealing a confused young woman who had just realized she was just a pawn in someone else's game. "You know what the funny thing is?" Mariana continued. "You thought you were manipulating him, when in fact he was manipulating you. Used your ambition to gain control of the company." She pulled out another document. "This is a plan to reorganize the company. After I supposedly sell my stake, he was going to fire all of you. The new structure is in place. New people have been picked up." Juliana gripped the armrests of her chair. "You're lying." "Why would I lie? I have all the evidence, including recordings of his conversations with his new partners." Mariana watched Juliana's world crumble. All her plans, all her dreams of power and wealth crumbled like a house of cards. "So what now?" Juliana asked in a trembling voice. "Now you take your pictures and leave, and tomorrow you'll write your resignation letter, like a decent woman who has decided to change jobs should." "And if I refuse?" "Then all these documents will end up at the police station. I'm sure they'd be interested to know about the financial fraud of corporate funds." Juliana slowly gathered up her photographs. Her hands were shaking. Her diamond bracelet glittered dimly in the lamplight. It now looked like a symbol of her humiliation. "I thought I loved him," she said quietly, heading for the door. "We all thought so," Mariana replied. "That was the extent of his talent." As the door closed behind Juliana, Mariana allowed herself to take a deep breath. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed the detective's number. "Antonio, we need to meet. There's new information." She then texted a message to Rafael. "Everything is going according to plan. Phase 1 is complete." Outside the window, dusk was thickening. Somewhere in another office, Eduardo was making his plans, unaware that his house of cards was about to collapse. Mariana gathered the documents in a folder. Tomorrow was the decisive day, but today she had won her first victory. There was an unusual tension in the office. Sofia Macedo and Regina Cardoso continued to work as if nothing had happened, unaware that their secrets had been revealed. Juliana watched them with a new eye. Now she noticed the same signs of attention from Eduardo, the same special smiles, the same casual touches. Mariana was sitting in her office reviewing documents when her phone vibrated, a message from Detective Cesar. "There is new information on financial transactions. Urgent." She quickly packed her bag and headed for the exit. She bumped into Rafael in the hallway. "I'm on my way to see the detective. Make sure all the paperwork is ready." Rafael nodded. "Be careful. I sense that Eduardo suspects something." Caesar's office was filled with new information. Printouts of bank transactions, photos of meetings, phone records. "Look," the detective pointed to the dates of the transfers. "He started withdrawing money as early as 6 months ago. Small amounts, through different accounts." Mariana scrutinized the documents. "And what's this account?" "Interesting detail. It's a Swiss bank account opened in Juliana Mendoza's name, but it's managed by Eduardo." At that moment the phone rang. It was Paula. "Sorry to disturb you, but I have urgent news. Juliana just met with Sofia and Regina at a cafe around the corner from the office." Mariana tensed. "Do they know?" "They do now, and they're furious." Meanwhile, in the small cafe, the 3 women sat at a far table, looking at the photographs spread out in front of them. Sofia Macedo, usually so cold and reserved, clutched her coffee cup in her hands as if she wanted to crush it. Regina Cardoso was crying quietly, smearing mascara on her cheeks. "He swore I was special," she repeated. Said he'd never met anyone like me. Sophia grinned bitterly. He said it to all of us, word for word. Juliana pulled out a tape recorder and turned on the recording. Eduardo's voice repeated the same confessions to different women like a memorized text. Now for the best part. Juliana spread out the bank statements. He was planning to get rid of us all after the company reorganization. Sophia turned pale. What do you mean? The new structure is already in place. Without us. We were just pawns in his game. In the office, Mariana met with Raphael. He brought the new documents. The lawyers have prepared all the papers. Tomorrow we can start the procedure to check the company's financial activities. Eduardo doesn't suspect anything? He's too sure of himself. He thinks he's in control. That evening, Juliana sat alone in her apartment, looking at the diamond bracelet, a gift from Eduardo. She knew now that Sophia and Regina had received the exact same bracelets. She removed the jewelry and tossed it into her desk drawer. Her phone rang. It was Eduardo. "Darling, are you free tonight?" His voice, which had seemed so special before, now sounded fake and cloying. "No, Eduardo. I'm busy," she was quiet. "And I'll be busy tomorrow too. And the day after that." "Is something wrong?" "Oh, you have no idea what happened." Juliana felt the tears flowing down her cheeks. "But you'll find out soon enough." She disconnected the phone and pulled out a bottle of wine. The events of the last few days flashed before her eyes, all those moments when she had felt special, the only one loved. How silly she looked. Mariana spent the evening preparing for the crucial day. She laid out all the documents in chronological order, evidence of cheating, financial fraud, secret accounts. Tomorrow it would all be on the boardroom table. Her daughter Camille called late at night. "Mom, I still can't believe it. How could he?" "Honey, some people aren't what they seem." Mariana tried to speak calmly. "The important thing is that we found out the truth in time." After talking to her daughter, she sat in the dark for a long time. Tomorrow was going to be what she had been preparing for the past weeks. The end of a 25-year marriage, the end of illusions, the end of the old life. The phone vibrated quietly, a message from Raphael. "Everything is ready for tomorrow. You'll be fine. I'm here for you." Those simple words gave her strength. She was no longer alone in this struggle. The morning of the decisive day was unusually clear. Mariana woke up early, every movement difficult, as if the air around her had become thick and heavy. She had chosen a strict black suit, a kind of mourning for 25 years of a marriage based on lies. The office was unaccustomedly quiet. The employees, sensing the tension, tried to keep out of sight of the management. Mariana noticed Juliana's desk empty. She hadn't come to work. Sophia Macedo sat at her computer, pale and red-rimmed. Regina Cardoso was also absent. Raphael met her at the elevator. "All the documents are ready. The lawyers are waiting for your signal." "Thank you." Mariana clutched the file folder. "You have been. You are a tremendous support for me." At that moment, the elevator doors opened and Eduardo entered. He looked as confident as ever. Impeccable suit, perfect hair, the usual winning smile. "Good morning, darling." He leaned over to kiss his wife on the cheek, but she pulled away. No sooner had he reached his office than Juliana burst into the reception area. Her expensive suit was wrinkled, her makeup smeared, and she held a file folder in her hands. "You?" She pointed a trembling finger at Eduardo. "You've been lying to me, all this time." The staff began to peer out of their offices. Eduardo tried to take control of the situation. "Juliana, let's go to my office." "No!" Her shout echoed through the office. "No more secrets. Let everyone know what you're really like." She began to scatter the pictures on the floor. "Here, look everyone. Here he is with Sophia, and here he is with Regine, and these are bank statements. Look how our esteemed executive is spending company money on his mistresses." Eduardo turned pale. "Juliana, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand everything perfectly." She snatched a diamond bracelet from her hand and threw it in his face. "I thought I was special, that you only loved me, and it turns out I'm just one of many." Sophia Macedo slowly stood up from her desk. Her face was white as chalk. "You told me the same words, word for word, every Thursday in the same restaurant." Eduardo looked around like a hunted animal. The staff whispered, pointing to the photos scattered on the floor. His perfectly constructed world was crumbling before his eyes. At that moment, Mariana appeared. She calmly approached her husband. "Now it's my turn." She opened her folder and began pulling out documents. "Here is the evidence of all the financial frauds. Shell companies, sham contracts, secret Swiss bank accounts. Not only did you betray me as a wife, you betrayed the company we were building together." Eduardo tried to grab the documents. "You wouldn't dare." "Already dared." Mariana smiled a cold smile. "The lawyers already have copies of those documents. And the police. You'll destroy the company." "No, Eduardo. The company was destroyed by you, by your greed, by your scheming, by your lies." Juliana laughed a hysterical laugh. "And you know what the funny thing is? He planned to get rid of all of us. We were supposed to be on the street after the company reorganization." Sophia stepped closer. "Is that true? All those promises about promotions, about a future together?" Eduardo was silent. His face was covered with sweat. His tie was off to the side. He no longer looked confident and strong, just a frightened man whose manipulations had finally been revealed. Mariana pulled out one last document. "And this is the divorce petition. You can take your time signing it. You'll have plenty of time to think about it. Perhaps even in prison." She turned to the staff. "Everyone please get back to work. The board of directors will meet in an hour." Juliana took one last look at Eduardo. "I loved you. I really loved you. And you're not even capable of real feelings." She turned around and walked towards the exit. Sophia followed her, wiping away tears as she went. The staff slowly dispersed to their seats, whispering and glancing at the scattered photos. Eduardo stood in the middle of the reception area, confused and aged. His entire carefully constructed kingdom of lies had crumbled in a matter of minutes. Mariana gathered her papers and headed toward her office. Raphael was waiting for her at the door. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I am now. For the first time in a long time, I feel free." She entered the office and closed the door behind her. There was a lot of work ahead of her. She had to save the company, deal with the fallout from the financial shenanigans, rebuild her reputation. But this was already a new chapter of her life, a chapter where she was no longer a victim of other people's lies. 6 months had passed. Mariana stood at the window of her new office, located in a modern business center on the other side of town. After a high-profile scandal, she had indeed sold her stake in Eduardo's company. The price was more than generous, considering the dirt she possessed. She'd used the money to start her own consulting firm, taking some of her best people with her. Her new office was smaller than the previous one, but it had a completely different atmosphere. Light, creative, filled with energy and enthusiasm. The walls were decorated with bright, abstract paintings that she had chosen together with Camilla. Her daughter, by the way, was now in charge of the entire creative department of the company, successfully combining it with the development of her own fashion brand. Mariana looked at her watch. The working day was coming to an end. She took out a small cosmetic bag from her closet and corrected her makeup, glancing in the small mirror. Lately, she'd been catching more and more of that unfamiliar spark of happiness in her reflection. Her phone rang softly, a message from Raphael. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hope you didn't forget our date?" She smiled. Of course she hadn't forgotten. Those evenings with him had become the most enjoyable part of her new life. Raphael had left his old company almost immediately after the scandal. Now he worked for a large international bank, but he found time to help Mariana with the financial matters of her new business. However, they both knew it wasn't just about business. Mariana packed her bag, checked the documents on her desk, and turned off her computer. Her new office was drenched in flowers. Raphael sent fresh bouquets every week. Today, they were white orchids, the same ones she'd seen on their first date. Paula, who was now the executive director, was waiting for her in the reception area. "Don't forget, there's a presentation for new clients tomorrow at 10. "Of course I remember." Mariana smiled at her friend. "Are all the materials ready?" "Already sent you the final version. And yes, have fun tonight. You deserve it." Standing at the exit of the business center was Raphael, tall, elegant, with a slight gray on his temples that only added to his charm. In his hands he held a single red rose. "For the most successful businesswoman in town." He held out the flower to her and kissed her gently on the cheek. "Just one rose?" she teased. "The rest are waiting at the restaurant." He smiled enigmatically and offered her his hand. They walked through the evening streets, talking about everything in the world. Mariana talked about the new project they had started last week, about how Camilla was preparing for the show of her new collection. Raphael listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You know," he said as they passed the fountain where they had once kissed for the first time, "I thank fate every day for bringing us together, even if the path to get there was so difficult." Mariana squeezed his hand. "Sometimes you have to go through the darkness to see the light." The restaurant turned out to be the same one they'd gone to on their first date. But tonight, their table was especially beautifully decorated. There were candles everywhere, and there were actually roses in vases. Dozens of red roses. "Do you remember this table?" Raphael asked, pushing back a chair for her. "Of course I do. This is where you first told me I deserved to be happy. And I want to say it again tonight." He took her hand in his. "You deserve all the best, Mariana. And I want to be the one to make you happy every day." The waiter brought champagne, the same champagne they'd drunk that first night. Mariana felt something special tonight, something hovering in the air. "Here's to us," Raphael said, raising his glass. "Here's to new beginnings and happy endings." She smiled, looking into his eyes. There was everything in them that she had never seen in Eduardo's gaze: sincerity, warmth, true love. Not ostentatious, not feigned, but the kind that showed itself in the smallest things, in the way he remembered her favorite coffee, in the way he listened to her stories about her work, in the way he supported all her endeavors. Outside the window, another day was burning up, but for Mariana it was special. The day when she finally realized that the past was really behind her. A new life was ahead, her own, built on her terms, with a man who saw her not as an appendix to his ambitions, but as an equal partner and a woman to love. She was happy, truly happy.